Oklahoma is going to Lincoln, Nebraska for a noon kickoff, and I cannot wait for this game. Oklahoma is favored by 11, and you know the storyline circulating in Lincoln this week. Unless you've been living under a rock, allow me to illuminate you. Scott Frost was fired after a devastating loss to Georgia Southern. That was kind of the final straw. They spent a good amount of money to fire him when they did. They could have saved themselves a smooth $7.5 million by waiting until October 1st. They decided, no, we're not going to do that. So enter in Mickey Joseph. He was the receivers coach. He's now the interim head coach for Nebraska. And we'll start with Nebraska. I'm just fascinated to see how do they respond to their head coach being fired, because this is shaping up to sort of be a woe is me. Oh, poor Nebraska. Oh, they lost their head coach. Season hasn't started how they want to. And they got Oklahoma coming into town. Nobody's giving Nebraska a chance. So what does that do? No pressure for the Cornhuskers. That pressure bubble of having your head coach, is he going to be there? Is he not going to be there? Is he going to be fired by October? Will he finish the year? Pop. That's what just happened. The pressure bubble burst at Nebraska. So all of the tension that was built up, all of the frustration and ambiguity and the storylines that loomed large, those are all gone right now. For Nebraska, they probably have the most locked-in focus they've had or been able to have really since the Northwestern game. I am very intrigued to see how they answer this call to action. I would not be surprised in the slightest if we see a refreshed Nebraska team. I'm not pumping sunshine and rainbows and things of that nature. I'm not trying to sell you some sort of optimistic view of Nebraska. I'm just saying, a lot of those distractions have now gone away that were previously there in Lincoln. It's not a knock on Scott Frost, just the nature of the beast when you lose in the fashion they had lost in the past. For them to win this game, though, can't let it become a track meet. I would study that App State game from last weekend when they beat Texas A&M. I think it might take that kind of blueprint because Oklahoma's offense is explosive. We'll get to more of them in a second, but you have a running back at Nebraska, and Anthony Grant, who, for starters, hasn't had a single carry this year that loses yards. He's also averaging 6 yards a carry. So feed him. He needs to see the ball 25, 30 times. Allow him to just will you forward. Casey Thompson and the offense have actually been pretty good. They've averaged 35 points a game, so there's not a ton of issues, and I say that lightly. I know they have their own deficits within that offense, but you have enough to score points. Like, Nebraska should be able to score points for the most part. Casey Thompson also had a bit of success against this Oklahoma team last year. Now, I understand this different Oklahoma team in terms of who was coaching them and how the defense was called, and even a lot of those guys that were on that defense last year. I'm just saying, if there's any positivity to take away when it comes to when Nebraska has the football, Casey Thompson has had success against Oklahoma. Anthony Grant is a dog. Feed him. If you can't do that, if you can't hold the ball, if you're Nebraska, there may be some issues because you have proven on multiple occasions you have issues stopping the run. I cannot get it out of my head. I'm watching Nebraska Northwestern, and they're showing the tight view. And for those of you that don't know, the tight view is essentially you're watching the play that just happened from the offensive line's vantage point. So I'm watching the offensive line, I'm watching the back of the quarterback, and watching the play unfold. The defensive line for Nebraska was just deleted from the frame. You're seeing that guard wash down. He just pushes that defensive tackle out of the picture. That ain't good. Hard to win football games when your defensive line is getting deleted from the frame. Okay? So the potential solution to that, I would imagine, is let's add more bodies to the run game. If we're going to lose, we can't lose in the run game. We cannot die a slow death if we're Nebraska. I would say let's trust our DBs. There's been a little bit of adjustment in terms of how they're being coached this coming week. You know, have a guy coaching safeties and corners as opposed to just a whole DBs unit, if that makes sense. Typically, you have a coach for both position group. Nebraska said, we have a DBs coach. That was the Scott Frost era. Come in Mickey Joseph. They said we're going to coach them separately. I think it's a good thing. That's got to be the way that you go if you're Nebraska. You cannot allow yourself to just continue to get run over. So commit something extra to the run game, find a way to somehow minimize the damage there, and maybe, just maybe, with a crowd at your back, you have a puncher's chance. Again, no more noise. No more chitter chatter about will Scott Frost be there or not. I think for the first time in a long time, they have some real focus behind this program. For Oklahoma, this is going to be their first real test. They played Kent State and then played UTEP. Beat the brakes off both of them. Cost us some money, actually, last weekend, not covering, that's fine. For the Sooners, keep the main thing the main thing. Don't change who you are. Even more so, can you stay who you want to be against your first real opponent? This will be the first time they're tested. Now, I know Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern. I'm not saying that they're necessarily going to be world beaters in terms of what they bring on defense, but it'll be a different caliber of player than Kent State and UTEP. No disrespect to those programs. You still have some guys like Ochaun Mathis lined up across from you. You still have Garrett Nelson you got to block. I would venture to say neither of those guys, anyone similar to those guys, play at Kent State or UTEP. Just the facts of the matter, okay? Can you still be who you want to be? You want to run a lot of plays. You want to go fast. I think similar to what we just talked about with Nebraska, this rides with the defense. A lot of what Oklahoma wants to do will be dictated by the defense. This will be their first test. This will be the first test for this Oklahoma program, and honestly, we're going to get a good sense of, okay, how much of Brent Venables' blueprint is on this defense. Because you can look good against Kent State and UTEP. I keep saying that over and over again. That's no disrespect to those programs. You can look solid against those teams, but when you play an offense like Nebraska that has been very quietly potent, how much do you have to adjust what you do? Because if you have to just reinvent the wheel and you have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we were solid the first 2 weeks, but we had some issues against Nebraska. I don't think that's the conversation you want to have on Sunday and Monday when you watch this thing back. Can you be who you want to be? Which sounds simplistic. I assure you it's more difficult to do than to say. Oklahoma has a great opportunity to validate a lot of the things they did in Game 1 and Game 2. Because it'll be a real road test. Let me tell you, that sellout streak in Lincoln, that's real. There's going to be an unfriendly environment. This is a rivalry game. The Big 8 is back, baby. Well, not all the way back, but in this game it's back. Dylan Gabriel, a guy that I expect a lot of. I'm curious to see how he leads this team going forward, how he leads this team in this game. When things don't go right, because there will be a time in this game, whether it's a false start or whether it's as big as an interception, when something doesn't break Oklahoma's way for the first time, how much waver do they have? How cool is their hand? Is it a lot of this, or is it, we're good? Deep breath, road environment. Let's settle in now. Excited to see how mature this team is. When it comes to our prediction, though, I cannot get that out of my head. There is too much inconsistency on the defensive line for Nebraska, and something has to give. If they're able to dedicate other bodies to the run game, which I think they're going to have to do, I worry about the matchups on the outside. I worry about who has to cover Marvin Mims. I worry about who's going to cover Stoops. I think that Oklahoma, at the end of the day, just has too many answers for what Nebraska could potentially supply to combat them on the defensive side of the ball. So our score prediction in this one, I think Nebraska actually gives a strong kick in the first half. I think they give them a little bit to play with, but ultimately I think Oklahoma steadies themselves and wins this game. Final score 34-21, Sooners win in Lincoln. Oklahoma, a playoff team for us. I know it's been 2 games. A lot of people's playoff boards are sort of in the trash now. Ours is still staying above water, but again, it's going into week 3. A lot of these teams haven't really played anybody yet. Excited to see what they do. Should get a good litmus test for Oklahoma in that game. I think we learned a lot about Oklahoma. For Nebraska, going to be a good gut check in their first game post-Scott Frost era. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.